Captain Thorne sat in the command chair of the Rust Bucket, a ship as charitably named as a politician's integrity. The cockpit smelled of burnt coffee and something that might have once been chicken or rat. On a good day, they were the same. So, here we are, staring at the biggest middle finger to human engineering I've ever seen, Thorne said, eyeing the enormous alien dreadnought drifting past Earth's orbit. It loomed like an ancient ghost ship, all jagged angles and ominous shadows, a real mood lifter if you liked your moods dark and soul-crushing. Leaning against the bulkhead was Mags, the team's tech specialist, mainly because she knew how to reboot a computer without cursing it into oblivion. "Think it's abandoned?" she asked, squinting at the threat display which for once wasn't just warning them about imminent financial ruin, or just biding its time before it eats us. "Either way, we're about to find out," Thorne replied, because if there was one thing Thorne loved, it was bad decisions made confidently. "Suit up, people. We're going treasure hunting, or casualty counting." "Depends on our luck." Jax, the weapons guy, grinned like a kid in a candy store that specialized in explosive candy. "Hell yeah, let's see what these aliens left lying around. Maybe it's their version of free samples." "Yeah, if you're into intergalactic plagues or cursed tech," Mags quipped, securing her gear. "Next time, can we find something not likely to kill us? Maybe a nice nebula." As the Rust Bucket's airlock clanked open, Thorne led the way onto the alien ship, holding a flashlight that had a 50/50 chance of exploding if you sneezed near it. Inside, the Dreadnought was a maze of shadowy corridors and flickering lights, the kind of place where even ghosts might say, "Nah, too creepy for me." "Welcome to the haunted house of the galaxy," Thorne announced, his voice echoing eerily. He turned to see Mags, Jax, and the rest of the team shuffling behind, each one trying to look braver than they felt. "Rule number 1, folks. If you hear anything whispering, don't whisper back. It's never a good idea." "What do you reckon this thing's made of?" Jax asked, tapping a bulkhead with a wrench. "Looks like steel, feels like doom, judging by the decor. My guess is despair with a hint of bad intentions," Thorne replied, shining his light across the walls lined with inscrutable symbols. "And a splash of screw you just for effect." As they moved further into the ship, the oppressive atmosphere pressed down like a bad hangover, promising nothing good. Every step seemed to echo louder than the last, each metallic clang a reminder that they were possibly not alone. "Anyone else feeling like we're being watched?" Mags asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh sure, because being watched by invisible aliens sounds like a party," Thorne muttered, scanning the gloom. "Besides, it's probably just the paranoia. Best part of being human." They entered what looked like a control room, or maybe a really high-tech torture chamber, hard to tell with alien interior design. Consoles blinked with unreadable scripts, and something that might have been a chair looked more like a medieval device for encouraging honesty. "Look at this," Mags said, pointing to a display that seemed to pulse rhythmically, like it was breathing. "I don't know what it does, but I'm willing to bet it involves a lot of pain." "Brilliant deduction, Sherlock," Thorne replied, poking at a panel with the confidence of a drunken gambler. "Let's leave it alone until we can get a manual, or a priest." Suddenly, a low hum filled the air, like the ship was waking up, deciding whether to say hello or "you're screwed." The lights flickered and the temperature dropped, the kind of chill that made skin crawl and raised the fine hairs on the back of your neck. "Okay, this is the part where everyone swears they left the oven on and decides to go home, right?" Jax asked, his usual bravado slipping. "Not quite," Thorne said, feeling a thrill of fear twisted with excitement. "We're here to find something worth the risk, remember." Like a bad joke at a funeral, it wouldn't be the same without it. They continued to explore, the tension as thick as the gunk in Jax's coffee mug that nobody dared touch. Mags kept glancing over her shoulder, her eyes wide. "I keep expecting something to jump out at us," she said. "If it does, just remember, it's probably got worse things to deal with than humans with trust issues," Thorne replied, trying to keep the mood light even as the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. Finally, they entered a massive chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood a colossal structure, humming with energy, beautiful and terrifying, like a nuclear reactor designed by a mad artist. Mags whistled low, a sound swallowed by the room. What the hell is that? Our ticket to fame or an early grave, depending on how today plays out, Thorn answered, stepping closer, the thrill of discovery sparking against the dread creeping in his veins. But as they approached, the Dreadnought's systems flared to life, consoles lighting with urgency, alarms bleeding in a language no one understood. The ship wasn't as dead as it seemed. "Time to go," Thorn ordered, but the doors slammed shut, trapping them with whatever ancient horror they had disturbed. The Dreadnought's lights shifted to an angry red, casting the team in a bloody glow. Thorn drew his weapon, the little comfort it provided an illusion. "Well," he said, trying to muster a grin and failing. "Looks like we just became house guests. I hope they serve hors d'oeuvres," Jax muttered, scanning for targets. Mag shook her head, her fingers dancing over a console. "I knew this was a bad idea, but hey, at least I won't have to pay off my student loans." Thorn laughed, a short bark of sound. "And here I thought we'd have a nice, quiet day of grave robbing." As the walls seemed to close in, each creak and groan of the ship a cruel joke, Thorn prepared for the worst. And to think some people spent their days in cozy offices worrying about spreadsheets. "All right, team," Thorn said, voice steady despite the chaos. "Let's earn our hazard pay." The ship's system emitted a noise that might have been laughter or a warning. Hard to tell with aliens, but one thing was clear. The Dreadnought had secrets it wasn't ready to part with, and neither was it keen on letting its new guests leave. "I always wanted to die in an interesting way," Mag said, her voice trembling only slightly. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Thorn replied, looking at the massive structure in the room's center, its purpose unknown, its potential limitless, or possibly lethal. They would have to unravel the mystery, survive the Dreadnought's deadly embrace, or join the countless souls lost in the void. The universe didn't cut them any slack, but Thorn grinned anyway, adrenaline surging. It was going to be one hell of a ride. The Rust Bucket's team shuffled deeper into the bowels of the Dreadnought, their footsteps echoing ominously in the quiet corridors. The further they went, the more it felt like walking into the belly of a beast that had long since forgotten it had swallowed them whole. "Whoever built this place had a real flair for the dramatic," Thorn remarked, shining his unreliable flashlight over walls etched with cryptic alien runes. They glistened like the bathroom graffiti of an interstellar truck stop. "Makes me feel like I'm in an art exhibit. One of those pretentious ones. Bet you 50 credits it's just a list of reasons why we're boned," Jax replied, his voice dry enough to match the air. He poked at the wall with the barrel of his gun, flinching slightly when nothing exploded. "I wonder if they had a word for oops." "I think we're gonna find out," Mags muttered, tapping at her tablet trying to make sense of the alien text. "So far, I'm getting danger, death, and turn back, which is basically every relationship I've ever had." The atmosphere grew heavier as they moved, like walking into an alien version of a Gothic cathedral, complete with all the foreboding and none of the hope. The lights flickered in a way that suggested the Dreadnought was as indecisive about its mood as Thorn was about dinner choices. "Be nice if this thing came with a map," Thorn said, squinting into the shadows, "or even a "you are here" sign. Because right now I feel like we're ants in an existential maze." The team turned a corner and nearly stumbled into a room filled with bizarre alien artifacts, scattered like the leftovers of a cosmic garage sale. Some glowed with an unnatural light, others seemed to hum ominously, and one or two looked like they'd come straight out of a mad scientist's fever dream. "Look at this stuff," Jax exclaimed, his eyes wide with the kind of glee usually reserved for kids in a candy store. "If we survive, we could sell this to a museum. Or a circus." "Yeah, because every circus needs a 'what the hell is that' exhibit," Mag said, gingerly picking up something that looked like a cross between a Rubik's Cube and a torture device. "Or a 'how fast can you clog your arteries' challenge." Thorn picked up a sphere that pulsed with an eerie light, half expecting it to either explode or start singing. Neither happened, which was only slightly reassuring. I think we've stumbled onto the alien version of a junk drawer. They weaved through the room, careful not to touch anything too eagerly. The artifacts were certainly fascinating, but in the same way a cobra is interesting, best admired from a distance. Anyone else feel like we're walking through a haunted antique shop? Mags asked, setting down a weirdly warm piece of metal. I'm just waiting for a ghost to jump out and demand I buy something. If it does, just tell it you're broke, Thorn suggested, eyeing a particularly menacing piece of equipment. Works with most salespeople. Before they could delve deeper into the pile of potential hazards, a door at the far end of the room hissed open, revealing what they were all hoping not to find: bodies. The room beyond was more a crypt than a chamber, filled with the remnants of the alien crew. Their forms were slumped over consoles or sprawled across the floor, each one a testament to how well their last day went. Spoiler: not well. Guess we know why this ship's drifting, Jack said, his bravado tempered by the grim sight. Looks like they tried to solve their problems the good old-fashioned way, dying. Thorn crouched next to what might have been the captain, or just an unfortunate crew member with a bad seat assignment. The alien's features were strange, almost spider-like, and the expression on its face could only be described as "oh, crap." They didn't just die, Mag said, inspecting a nearby console. They screamed. This log is full of warnings, like something's coming, and run. You know, the usual. So whatever killed them isn't just space ghost stories, Thorn mused, scanning the room for clues. It's real, and possibly still here. Just once, I'd like to find a ship full of friendly, alive aliens who want to share their tech and not murder us, Jack sighed, checking his ammo. But I guess that's too much to ask. Remember when we thought the hardest part of today was going to be finding parking? Thorn asked, standing amidst the silent chorus of the deceased. Good times. They moved cautiously through the room, careful not to disturb the dead. The air was stale, heavy with the weight of desperation and fear, like a long-forgotten story waiting to be told or buried. All right, so what killed them? Mags wondered aloud, fiddling with a console that buzzed weakly to life. Because I'd like to avoid meeting it if possible. Judging by the way they are all facing, I'd say it came from that direction. Thorn pointed towards a darkened hallway, its entrance like a gaping maw. And yeah, I'm not keen on introductions either. The team exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. They had come this far, and turning back now would mean admitting defeat, a concept Thorn was allergic to. Okay, here's the plan, Thorn said, shouldering his weapon with a bravado that only mildly betrayed his nerves. We're gonna find out what happened, maybe figure out if there's any tech we can salvage, and hopefully get out without joining the ghost crew. Solid plan, Jack said, grinning with the enthusiasm of a man who just realized he'd left the stove on. And if we fail, at least we won't be around to hear "I told you so." Optimism, Jax. It's why you're my favorite pessimist. Thorn clapped Jax on the back, earning an eye roll. Don't get all sentimental on me, Captain. We've still got a ways to go. Jax gestured towards the ominous hallway, its shadows seemingly alive with anticipation. With the kind of bravery that could only come from desperation, or a complete lack of other options, they stepped into the corridor, the air cooling further, prickling their skin as if flecked with ice. The walls seemed to close in, their dark surfaces reflecting the narrow beam of Thorn's flashlight, which flickered like it was auditioning for a horror film. Every creak and groan of the ship echoed in the silence, each noise a promise of something worse to come. Anyone else feel like we're walking through a horror movie? Mags whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the Dreadnought. Yeah, but no one wants to be the first one to die, Jax replied, keeping his weapon at the ready. So stick together and try not to trip over any conveniently placed obstacles. As they advanced, the hallway opened into a larger chamber, this one dominated by a massive, ominous structure that pulsed with energy. It loomed like a dark monolith, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. "What the hell is that?" Thorn asked, though he doubted anyone had a better guess than Trouble. "If I had to guess," Mag said, cautiously approaching the structure, "I'd say it's what the aliens were trying to stop. Or maybe start. Either way, it's probably not great for our health." The structure seemed to hum with a life of its own, a deep resonance that vibrated through the floor and into their bones. It was both mesmerizing and terrifying, like a siren's song that promised death rather than salvation. "Whatever it is, it's still active," Jax noted, eyeing the structure with a mix of awe and suspicion. "And if the rest of this ship is any indication, we don't want to be here when it fully wakes up." "Agreed," Thorn said, touching the structure's surface. It was ice cold, sending a chill through his hand and up his arm. "Let's see if we can figure out how to put this thing back to sleep." Mags worked at a nearby console, her fingers dancing over alien controls with the precision of someone who'd tackled enough malfunctioning tech to earn a PhD in bad ideas. "I think I've got something," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "This might be a shut-off sequence or a self-destruct. It's really hard to tell." "Well, we'll find out soon enough," Thorn said, backing away from the structure as Mags activated the sequence. "Everyone ready to run like hell always," Jax replied, already turning towards the exit as the chamber began to rumble, the sound building like an oncoming storm. As the structure's pulsing grew more erratic, the ship shuddered violently, throwing the team off balance. They scrambled towards the exit, adrenaline spurring them forward, the threat of imminent demise snapping at their heels. "Go, go, go!" Thorn shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and the roar of the Dreadnought coming to life in the worst possible way. They sprinted down the corridor, the ship's system screaming in protest as if it were a beast awoken from a deep slumber, angry and disoriented. Behind them, the chamber they'd just vacated began to collapse, the walls folding in with a thunderous crash. The team stumbled into the artifact room, the path ahead already beginning to crumble. They dodged falling debris, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, the prospect of escape growing slimmer by the second. "Tell me again why we do this for a living," Mags shouted, vaulting over a piece of equipment that had decided to block their path. "Because we're idiots with death wishes," Jax replied, sidestepping a fallen beam with the agility of someone whose life depended on it. They barreled through the corridors, the Dreadnought's death throes echoing around them, each sound a reminder of how close they were to becoming permanent residents. Finally, they reached the airlock, the rust bucket still docked, its rusty exterior a sight for sore eyes. They tumbled inside, Mags slapping the control panel to seal the doors behind them. As the airlock clanged shut, Thorn collapsed into the pilot's seat, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "Let's get the hell out of here," he said, firing up the ship's engines with a fervent prayer to any deity that might be listening. The rust bucket lurched away from the Dreadnought, the ship systems groaning in protest but responding nonetheless. As they cleared the alien vessel, it continued its death spiral, folding in on itself, the energy signature growing brighter until it was a blinding beacon in the void. The team watched in silence, the Dreadnought's destruction both awe-inspiring and surreal, a reminder of how close they'd come to becoming space dust. "Well," Thorn said, once the ship was safely back on course, "that was a party and a half." "Everyone's still in one piece, mostly," Mag said, checking her equipment for damage. "Though I think I left my dignity somewhere back there. I'm just glad we didn't end up as cosmic confetti," Jax added, leaning back in his seat with a sigh of relief. "But next time, can we aim for something less explodey?" Thorn chuckled, the sound a little hysterical but genuine. "I'll see what I can do. Now, let's get home before the universe throws another curveball our way." As the rust bucket set a course for the nearest safe harbor, the crew settled into their seats, each one grateful for the narrow escape and the chance to live to make more terrible decisions another day. The void stretched out before them, full of possibilities, both good and bad. But for now, they had survived, and in their line of work, that was the best victory of all. As the rust bucket shuddered its way through the cosmic emptiness, the crew attempted to settle their frayed nerves with a mix of sarcasm and denial, the kind of therapy they could afford. Thorn had the ship on autopilot, trusting it about as far as he could throw it, which wasn't far at all, given its unfortunate resemblance to a hunk of junk held together by little more than hope and duct tape. "So, Mags," Thorn began, still trying to rub the tension out of his neck, "what do you make of that alien food stockpile we passed untouched?" Mags replied, fiddling with her tablet as though it might conjure an answer from the digital ether. "It's weird. It's like they all just decided starving to death was more appealing than whatever was on the menu. Could be they knew what they were doing." Jax chimed in, leaning back with an air of someone who had just narrowly avoided a tax audit. "I once ate at a spaceport diner that made fasting look appealing." "Right, but these aliens didn't just pass on the salad bar," Mag said, her brow furrowing as she navigated through a particularly stubborn alien data file. "They had enough supplies to last a decade, untouched." Thorn mulled this over, a grimace on his face like he'd bitten into something unpleasant, probably a good metaphor for this entire mission. "Maybe their food was toxic or something. Not that I'm suggesting we try it to find out." "Gee, Captain, you never let us have any fun," Jax retorted, pretending to pout before the corners of his mouth twitched into a smirk. "Point is," Thorn continued, ignoring Jax's antics, "if they were avoiding their own grub, maybe there's something more to it. Could be the key to why they all kicked the bucket. We're not exactly in any shape to run a full-on alien autopsy," Mags pointed out, though the glint of intrigue in her eyes suggested she wouldn't mind trying. "But if the food's the reason they died, it might mean something else on this ship was messing with it. Like a parasite," Thorn suggested, half kidding, but the other half dead serious. "Something that made their food about as digestible as a brick." "Great. So not only do we have to worry about supernatural horrors," Jax said with mock enthusiasm, "but now our lunch could try to eat us back." "Yeah, but we're smart enough not to chow down on alien rations, right?" "Right." Thorn's question hung in the air like the stale aroma of Rust Bucket's interior, persistent and unavoidable. "Captain," Jax replied with a grin that could only be described as insufferable, "I wouldn't touch alien food with a 10-foot fork." "Good man," Thorn said, glancing out the viewport at the stars, which didn't seem particularly interested in their plight. "Still, we're not going to solve anything just sitting here in orbit." "Mags, think you can dig up anything else from your magic tablet over there?" Mags sighed, the sound of someone who'd been over this particular field of digital weeds too many times. "I'll give it a shot, but this alien tech likes to play hard to get." "That's the spirit," Thorn encouraged, tapping a few commands into the ship's console. "We'll figure out what happened to these poor bastards one way or another. Just as long as it doesn't involve adding to the body count." The rust bucket cruised on, leaving the ominous glow of the collapsing Dreadnought behind, a reminder of their narrow escape and the death trap they'd just dodged. Yet the mystery of the untouched food lingered like a bad aftertaste, refusing to be swallowed. Mags continued to poke and prod at her tablet, muttering curses under her breath that would probably translate into any alien language as technical difficulties. Meanwhile, Jax took the opportunity to check their stockpile of ammunition, a comforting ritual when facing the unknown, even if bullets wouldn't solve a problem of this magnitude. "You know, if we keep at this long enough," Jax said, looking up from his count, "maybe we'll stumble onto a solution purely by accident. Or we'll just keep tripping over our own feet," Thorn replied, though he couldn't help but chuckle. "Seems to be our modus operandi." "Hey, Captain," Mags piped up, eyes still glued to her tablet, "I've got something here. It's a record of the crew's health checks. Looks like they were all in pretty decent shape until about a week before the transmission stopped. And let me guess," Thorne said, leaning forward with interest. That's when they stopped eating the food. Bingo, Mags confirmed, the word hanging heavy with implication. Whatever it was, it hit them fast. Some kind of interference, maybe. Hell, for all we know, it was their gas station sushi. But why not just leave? Jax wondered aloud, tapping his boot against the metal floor in thought. They had a ship. They could have hopped planets in search of the proverbial better burger. Maybe they couldn't, Thorne mused, scratching at his stubble as if it held the answers. What if whatever kept them from eating their own food also stopped them from leaving? So, they were trapped on a ship full of food they couldn't eat, and eventually starved because of it. Mags looked up, her eyes reflecting a mix of horror and curiosity. That's one hell of a way to go. Death by irony, Jax said, shrugging with a nonchalance that only thinly veiled his discomfort. The universe's favorite joke. Well, at least we're not stuck on that ship anymore, Thorne said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. But we've got to figure out what made them leave their food untouched. Otherwise, we might be looking at a repeat performance. The realization settled over them like a lead blanket, heavy and cold. If their theory was right, they were dealing with something that could potentially affect them too. An invisible threat that had already claimed one crew and might not be picky about trying again. So, what's the plan, Captain? Mags asked, a hint of defiance in her tone. Because sitting around here waiting for the universe to serve us the next cosmic punchline isn't exactly appealing. We get proactive, Thorne decided, his jaw set with determination. Dig through everything we can find. Records, logs, hell, even the alien equivalent of grocery receipts if we have to. A good old-fashioned deep dive into alien bureaucracy. What could be more thrilling? Jax deadpanned, though there was a spark of excitement in his eyes. It's either that or sit here twiddling our thumbs hoping another ship doesn't come along and find us in the same state we found them, Thorne countered. Personally, I'd rather be doing something. Anything. All right, deep dive it is, Mags agreed, already preparing to delve into the data once more. And maybe, just maybe, we'll figure out how not to end up as a cosmic footnote. With renewed purpose, the crew set to work, each one acutely aware of the ticking clock that seemed to echo in the background. The weight of their mission pressed down like the gravity of a black hole, pulling them inevitably towards answers they hoped they wanted to find. As they sifted through the alien data, the rust bucket continued its lazy orbit, a rusty sentinel in the vast, indifferent void. And though they couldn't see it, the shadow of the Dreadnought still loomed large in their minds, a silent reminder of the mysteries and dangers that lurked out here, just waiting to be discovered. Time slipped by in a haze of data and caffeine, the crew's makeshift command center coming alive with the glow of screens and the hum of machinery. It was an orchestra of technology and determination, and the conductor was a mix of desperation and grim resolve. Got something, Mags announced suddenly, her fingers flying across the tablet's surface with renewed vigor. Looks like there was a report of some kind of, I don't know, energy interference. Thorne echoed the word like a beacon of hope and dread all at once. What kind of interference? Hard to say, Mags admitted, frustration creeping into her voice. The data's corrupted in places, but there's something about an energy field affecting, well, everything. The food, the crew, even the ship systems. Which means whatever was messing with their supplies might still be out there, Jax concluded, the realization settling over him with a weight that could crush stars. Or it might have died with the ship, Thorne said, though he wasn't entirely convinced. We can't assume anything, not until we know more. Agreed, Mags said, her eyes still scanning the data. But if we can isolate the source of that interference, we might be able to counteract it, or at least avoid it. All right, let's make that our priority, Thorne decided, feeling the momentum shift in their favor. If we can find out what caused this mess and how to neutralize it, we might just get out of this in one piece, and maybe even get a nice bonus for our trouble, Jax added, though the humor in his voice was more for morale than anything else. Right, because a few extra credits are exactly what I had in mind when thinking about avoiding a gruesome fate," Thorn replied, rolling his eyes. "But hey, I'm not going to say no to a payday." With a plan of action and determination burning in their veins, the crew dug deeper, each piece of data bringing them closer to the truth, or so they hoped. The universe, however, was not known for its generosity when it came to giving up its secrets easily. And as they worked, the shadow of the Dreadnought lingered, a silent reminder that some stories were best left untold. But not theirs. Not yet. With the kind of tenacity that only comes from staring death in the face and deciding to flip it off, the crew of the Rust Bucket pressed on, determined to unravel the mystery of the alien vessel and find a way to survive in a cosmos that seemed hell-bent on wiping them out. And if they were lucky, maybe, just maybe, they'd live to tell the tale of how they cheated death. Again. Or at least, they'd die with a smile on their faces and a witty one-liner on their lips. Because in the end, what more could you really ask for? "All right, folks," Thorn said as he peered through the grimy viewport of the Rust Bucket, where the Dreadnought loomed like a black hole of bad decisions. "Time to see what kind of cosmic booby traps these aliens left behind for us." "Just what I always wanted," Jax muttered, leaning back in his chair with the air of a man who expected things to go precisely wrong. To get shot at by advanced alien tech beats playing solitaire anyway. Mags looked up from her tablet, her eyes half hidden behind the smudged lenses of her glasses. "You ever think the universe has a sick sense of humor, like it just loves setting us up for failure?" "Yeah," Thorn replied, tapping the ship's console with a resigned sigh. "But at least it's consistent. All right, let's see if we can avoid becoming space debris. Autopilot, engage." The autopilot responded with a cheerful beep, the Rust Bucket lurching forward like a drunk trying to find its way home. Thorn couldn't help but wince. Trusting the autopilot was like trusting a used car salesman. It was only a matter of time before it let you down. As the ship drifted closer to the Dreadnought, a series of sinister red lights flickered to life across the alien hull. Each one blinked like the eyes of an angry god, ready to unleash divine retribution on their trespassing souls. Captain," Jax said, his voice tinged with the kind of nervous humor that signaled impending doom. "I think someone just rolled out the welcome mat." "Yeah, a welcome mat made of lasers," Mags added, her fingers flying over her tablet as she tried to make sense of the data streaming in. "I'm picking up automated defenses." "Looks like they really don't want company." "Fantastic," Thorn muttered, gripping the controls like they were his last lifeline. "All right, team, hold onto your butts. This is gonna get bumpy." The first volley sprang forth from the Dreadnought, a cascade of energy beams slicing through space with lethal precision. Thorn jerked the Rust Bucket to the side, the ship groaning in protest as it narrowly avoided becoming a new constellation. "Whoa, that's some aggressive hospitality," Jax quipped, his usual bravado now tinged with genuine alarm. "Can't we just send them a fruit basket and call it a day?" "I don't think these guys are into care packages," Mags replied, her eyes darting between her tablet and the chaos outside. "Not unless you're packing grenades in it." "Damn it," Thorn swore, adrenaline coursing through him as he twisted the controls, the Rust Bucket performing an awkward dance with death. "Jax, get to the turret. Mags, see if you can find a weak spot in their systems." "And here I thought today was going to be boring," Jax said, scrambling from his seat with the enthusiasm of a man heading to the gallows. He slid into the turret controls, fingers flying over the interface. "Keep it steady, Captain," Mags urged, frantically swiping through data. "We might just live to regret this." The Rust Bucket weaved through the barrage, Thorn's knuckles white on the control panel. Jax returned fire, his shots zipping through the void like angry fireflies. It was like trying to swat a swarm of bees with a newspaper, haphazard at best, futile at worst. "I hope you're having more luck with the tablet than I am with these guns," Jax called, frustration evident as he fired at the seemingly endless defenses. "Working on it," Mags muttered, her concentration fierce. If I can just disrupt their targeting systems, we might get a breather. Well, make it quick, Thorn snapped, throwing the ship into a barrel roll that sent every loose item clattering around the cabin. I don't know how much more of this the rust bucket can take. A near miss rocked the ship, and Jax cursed under his breath. Just remind me never to take a vacation with you guys. Got it, Mags exclaimed, her voice cutting through the tension like a lifeline. Disrupted their systems temporarily. We should have a few minutes before they recalibrate. Good work, Thorn said, relief washing over him like a brief shower in a desert. Jax, keep us covered. Mags, see if you can hack into their mainframe. Find out what the hell they are hiding. On it, Captain, Mags said, her fingers a blur on the screen. Let's hope these aliens didn't use Windows XP. As Mags worked her technological magic, the ship drifted out of the immediate danger zone, the hostile fire momentarily silenced. It was a lull in the storm, a chance to catch their breath before the next wave hit. Any idea what we're dealing with? Thorn asked, glancing over at Mags with a mix of hope and trepidation. Still sifting through data, she replied, the glow of her tablet casting an eerie light over her features. But from what I can tell, these defenses are old, like really old. They've been running on autopilot for centuries, maybe longer. Great, Jax said, rolling his eyes. So we're getting our asses kicked by alien antiques. Next, we'll be fighting killer toasters. Focus, Jax, Thorn ordered, though there was a wry smile playing at the corners of his mouth. We've got to get to the heart of this ship and find answers before they decide to reboot their murder machines. Right, Jax said, returning to his post with a sigh. Just another day in paradise. Mags continued her work, her brow furrowed with concentration. I think I've found a way into the Dreadnought systems. If I can just bypass their encryption. Be careful, Thorn warned, the weight of their situation pressing down on him like a lead blanket. Last thing we need is for you to trigger another wave of defenses. Relax, Captain, Mags reassured him, her voice steady even as she worked at a feverish pace. I got this. Minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity as they waited for any sign of progress. Thorn drummed his fingers against the console, his mind racing with the possibilities and the potential pitfalls. Finally, Mags let out a triumphant laugh. I'm in. These systems are a treasure trove of information. Looks like our energy interference theory was right on the money. And what about the food? Thorn pressed, his curiosity piqued. Did you find anything about why it was untouched? Still digging, Mags replied, her attention split between multiple streams of alien data. But it seems whatever was affecting them might have been linked to the ship itself, some kind of energy field originating from the core. Then that's where we need to go, Thorn declared, the decision heavy with risk. Get to the core, find the source, and shut it down before it shuts us down. Sounds like a plan, Jax agreed, though his tone was more resigned than enthusiastic. As long as we can avoid getting vaporized on the way. That's the spirit, Thorn said with a grim smile, his determination like a beacon in the darkness. All right, let's move. The rust bucket continued its cautious approach, the crew bracing themselves for whatever fresh hell awaited them. It was a mission fraught with danger, but also with the promise of answers, and maybe even a shot at survival. As they prepared for the next phase of their journey, the shadow of the Dreadnought loomed larger than ever, a silent testament to the mysteries and perils they were about to uncover. But despite the odds, they pressed on, driven by the indomitable spirit of humanity, and a shared belief that, no matter how grim things got, they'd face it together. The next few minutes passed in tense silence, the crew's focus honed razor-sharp as they navigated the treacherous path ahead. Each movement was calculated, every decision weighed against the potential consequences. It was a dance with death, one misstep away from disaster. All right, Mags, Thorn said, his voice low and steady. Think you can guide us to the core? I'll do my best, she replied, her confidence bolstered by the progress they had made. Just keep us steady and we might just pull this off. Steady is my middle name, Thorn shot back, though the humor was short-lived. They were getting close now, the Dreadnought's intricate systems laid bare before them like an open wound. As they approached the ship's heart, a new threat emerged, one that sent a shiver down Thorn's spine. Automated drones, sleek and deadly, whirred to life, their eerie hum echoing through the corridors. "Looks like we've got company," Jax observed, his hands already moving to the turret controls. "Just when I was starting to miss being shot at." "These things are fast," Mags warned, her eyes never leaving the data streaming in. "If they get too close, we're toast." "Then let's make sure they don't," Thorn said, his resolve hardening like steel. "Jax, take them out. Mags, keep us on course." The rust bucket surged forward, weaving through the maze of drones with a deftness that belied its battered exterior. Jax's shots rang out, a symphony of destruction as he picked off the drones one by one. "Not today, you tin cans," he muttered, grinning as another drone exploded in a shower of sparks. "You're having way too much fun," Mags commented, her focus split between guiding the ship and monitoring their surroundings. "Well, someone's got to enjoy this," Jax replied, though his bravado was tempered by the knowledge that the stakes were higher than ever. As they closed in on the core, the drones' numbers dwindled, the way forward clearing with each well-aimed shot. But the victory was short-lived, the threat far from over. "Almost there," Mag said, her excitement palpable as the core came into view. "Just a little further." "Let's finish this," Thorn declared, his voice a rallying cry for the crew. They were so close now, the answers they sought within reach. But as they approached the core, a final, desperate defense mechanism activated, the ship shuddering as a powerful energy surge tore through the systems. "Brace for impact," Thorn yelled, gripping the controls as the rust bucket careened wildly, the surge threatening to tear them apart. The crew held on for dear life, the ship's systems screaming in protest as they fought to regain control. It was a battle against the odds, a fight for survival in the face of overwhelming adversity. "Hold on," Mags shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "We're almost there." With a final Herculean effort, Thorn wrestled the ship back on course, the core now within arm's reach. It was a victory snatched from the jaws of defeat, a testament to their resilience in the face of insurmountable odds. As the rust bucket drew closer to the core, the crew knew they were on the brink of uncovering the truth, a truth that had eluded them for so long, and one that held the key to their survival. But as they prepared to dive into the heart of the Dreadnought, one thing was clear. The fight was far from over. The dangers they faced were only the beginning, the real battle still to come. Yet despite the challenges that lay ahead, they pressed on, fueled by the hope that, against all odds, they might just emerge victorious. Because in a universe that seemed determined to bring them down, they refused to go quietly, and they'd fight until their last breath to prove it. Captain Thorn stared at the rust bucket's control panel like it owed him money. The ship was holding together barely, but the situation was bleak. Supplies were dwindling faster than his patience at a bureaucrat's convention, and the Dreadnought's secrets remained frustratingly out of reach. "Captain, we're running low on just about everything that makes this a living situation," Jax's voice crackled over the intercom, as sarcastically upbeat as ever. "Water, food, hope, take your pick," Thorn sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "And here I was, hoping for a nice relaxing day getting shot at by alien death machines." "Well, Captain, you'll be pleased to know we're not out of sarcasm yet," Jax quipped, his tone as dry as the desert they all wished they weren't metaphorically stranded in. Mags was hunched over her tablet, the glow from the screen making her look like some kind of data-worshipping cultist. "I've got good news and bad news," she said without looking up. "Let's start with the bad news," Thorn replied, leaning back in his chair with the resignation of a man expecting the worst. "I could use a good wallow. Bad news is, we're almost out of rations," Mag said, adjusting her smudged glasses with a finger. "The good news is there's a chance we might find something edible on this ship," Jax snorted. "Alien ship food sounds about as appetizing as a plate of yesterday's regrets." Mag smirked. Better than nothing and possibly less toxic than Jax's cooking. Thorn chuckled, though it was a hollow sound. Their situation was dire, but they'd laugh in the face of death if it meant keeping their sanity intact, at least until the shooting started again. He studied the Dreadnought's logs, which Mags had managed to decrypt after what felt like a lifetime of swearing and caffeine consumption. The logs were a mess of gibberish and ominous warnings. Danger, death, turn back. A greatest hits album of bad omens. Looks like whoever was here last had a flair for the dramatic, Thorn muttered. These logs read like a goth kid's diary. Any clues about that energy field in the core? Mags asked, peering over at him with keen interest. It's the only lead we've got. Yeah, Thorn replied, his finger tracing over a line of alien script. There's something about human adaptability buried in here. Something about our biology being the key. Human adaptability, Jax echoed, eyebrows raised. That's rich. We're adaptable, all right. We adapt by dying in creatively stupid ways. Thorn shook his head. Maybe this ship needs something only a human can provide. Something in our genetic makeup. I know it sounds crazy. Crazy is our brand, Jax pointed out. If we weren't crazy, we wouldn't be here. Thorn grinned. Well, let's keep reading before we decide this theory belongs in Jax's cookbook. Mags tapped her chin, her eyes alight with curiosity. The aliens might have had some kind of symbiotic relationship with their ship. If that's the case, we might be able to fool it into thinking we're part of the crew. Or we could accidentally trigger a self-destruct sequence, Jax added helpfully. That's usually how these things go for us. Either way, Thorn said, standing up and clapping his hands together, we're in for one hell of a ride. So let's gear up and head to the core. As they prepared to venture deeper into the Dreadnought, the tension in the crew was palpable. Hope was a fragile thing, as likely to shatter under pressure as glass in a street brawl, but it was all they had left. Don't you just love these suicidal field trips? Jax remarked, strapping on his weapon. They're the highlight of my day, Mags replied sardonically. I'd hate to die of boredom after all. Thorn led the way through the ship's claustrophobic corridors, flashlight in hand. The device flickered ominously like it might explode at any moment, but Thorn clung to it like a lifeline. They moved cautiously, alert for any signs of danger. The Dreadnought's interior was a labyrinth of dark metal and half-lit halls, each turn a potential trap, each shadow a lurking threat. Who designed this place? Jax grumbled, stepping over a tangle of wires that resembled a mechanical intestine. Some kind of sadistic interior decorator, probably the same guys who thought automated death drones were a great idea, Thorn replied, peering into the darkness ahead. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Mags chimed in. Although broke is kind of our thing. Eventually they reached the core, a massive chamber filled with alien tech that hummed with a sinister energy. The place was like a cathedral of doom, complete with mysterious symbols and a lingering sense of foreboding. Well, here we are, Jax said, taking in the sight with a mix of awe and dread. The heart of darkness. Let's hope it doesn't have a pacemaker, Thorn muttered, eyeing the machinery warily. Mags approached the central console, her fingers dancing over the alien interface. Let's see what this baby can do, she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and determination. As she worked, Thorn surveyed the room, his mind racing with the implications of their discovery. If the ship really did require something human to function, it could be both their salvation and their doom. But they were running out of options, and time was a luxury they couldn't afford. If they didn't find a solution soon, their fate would be sealed. Just another footnote in the universe's darkly amusing tale. Mags, how's it looking? Thorn asked, his tone urgent but hopeful. There's a lot of encrypted data here, she replied, her focus unwavering. But I think I can create a temporary link using our DNA. It might just be enough to trick the system into thinking we're supposed to be here. And if it doesn't work, Jax asked, ever the pessimist. Then we blow up in a spectacular fashion, Mags said with a shrug. But at least it'll be interesting. Thorn nodded, steeling himself for what might come. Do it, he ordered, his voice firm. As Mags initiated the sequence, Thorn and Jack stood ready, their weapons drawn in case things went awry. The room filled with a low hum, a vibration that seemed to resonate in their bones. The console lit up, displaying a series of alien characters that Mags could barely decipher. "I think it's working," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Or it's getting ready to vaporize us," Jack suggested, though his tone was more curious than fearful. Thorn watched the core intently, his mind a tempest of thoughts and fears. They were on the cusp of something monumental, the edge of a precipice that promised either triumph or annihilation. But whatever happened next, he knew they'd face it together, bonded by shared hardships and a stubborn refusal to quit. A sudden surge of energy coursed through the room, the vibrations intensifying as the ship's systems came to life. It was as if the Dreadnought was awakening from a long slumber, its alien heart beating with renewed vigor. "Captain," Mags said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think we did it. The system recognizes us as part of the crew." Thorn let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "I guess that means we're officially alien property now." "Great," Jack said, lowering his weapon. "Do we get dental with that?" They shared a brief, relieved laugh, the tension in the room dissipating like smoke in the wind. It was a small victory, but one that felt monumental in their current predicament. But the celebration was short-lived. Just as they began to relax, a new threat emerged, the ship shuddering as alarms blared to life. "What's happening?" Thorn demanded, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. Mag stared at the console, her face a mask of confusion and panic. "The system's trying to purge us. It's recognized the intrusion." "Fantastic," Jax muttered, his sarcasm a thin veneer over genuine fear. "I knew it was too good to be true." Thorn's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. They'd come so far, fought so hard, only to be thwarted at the last hurdle. But he refused to give up, not now, not ever. "Mags, can you override it?" he asked, his voice a blend of urgency and determination. "I'm trying," she replied, her fingers flying over the console with renewed fervor. "But this system is designed to keep out idiots like us." The alarms grew louder, the threat of imminent disaster hanging over them like a guillotine blade. But they were nothing if not survivors, and Thorn wasn't about to let a little thing like impending doom stop them. "Everyone back to the rust bucket," he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. "We've got to get out of here before this thing decides we're expendable." As they made their way back through the winding corridors, desperation fueled their every step. They were running out of time, but they'd be damned if they went down without a fight. The rust bucket loomed into view, a battered but familiar sight that felt like the closest thing they'd had to home in a long time. Thorn ushered Mags inside, Jax covering their retreat before diving into the cockpit. "Fire up the engines," he barked, his hands a blur over the controls. "I don't care if it breaks every safety protocol in the book, just get us out of here." The ship roared to life, the engines straining as they powered up. Thorn could practically feel the Dreadnought systems closing in, a relentless force determined to swallow them whole. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, coaxing the ship to respond. "You've never let us down before, don't start now." With a deafening roar, the rust bucket surged forward, tearing free from the Dreadnought's grip. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, their escape a narrow but exhilarating victory. "Well, that was a close one," Jack said, sagging into his seat with a weary grin. "Remind me to never sign up for a sightseeing tour again." Mags laughed, the sound a bomb against the backdrop of chaos. "At least we got a good story out of it." Thorn smiled, his heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and relief. They'd survived against all odds, and though the universe seemed hell-bent on testing them, they hadn't lost their humanity or their sense of humor. But as they sailed away from the Dreadnought, the reality of their situation loomed once more. They still had no idea what lay ahead, what dangers and mysteries the vast expanse of space held in store. Yet despite the uncertainty, they pressed on, driven by the hope that somewhere out there, they'd find the answers they sought, and maybe, just maybe, a little peace along the way. Because in a universe as darkly humorous as theirs, refusing to give up was the ultimate act of defiance. And as long as they had each other, they were ready to face whatever came next. The rust bucket groaned like an old dog forced to chase a stick thrown a parsec too far, but it was a sound Thorn found comforting in its own way. The Dreadnought shrank behind them, a monstrous shadow slipping back into the abyss. It was one hell of a close call, but they'd pulled through, barely. The universe, that old joker, had decided to let them live another day, presumably to watch them flail around for its amusement. Thorn slumped into his captain's chair, the familiar creak of worn leather a balm to his frayed nerves. Jax and Mags settled into their places with the same weary relief, though Jax couldn't resist a parting shot. "I think my heart stopped pounding," Jax announced, rubbing his chest. "But if anyone asks, I died a hero's death, all right. Only if you promise to haunt me," Mags replied, her fingers still dancing over the tablet as she worked to stabilize their systems. "I could use some comic relief in the afterlife." Thorn let their banter drift around him, his mind already turning to the next problem. They had survived the Dreadnought's purge, sure, but they were still adrift, desperately short on supplies and now officially on an alien ship's unwanted guests list. Not exactly ticking off the old bucket list. "We need food," Thorn said, cutting through the chatter like an asteroid through vacuum. "And water, and not necessarily in that order." Jax raised an eyebrow. "You mean we can't live off sarcasm and bad decisions?" "Not according to latest science," Mags chimed in, pushing her glasses up her nose without looking up. "But I hear it's a growth industry." "All right," Thorn continued, ignoring their jibes. "That alien Dreadnought, it's got a decade's worth of untouched food. We just need to figure out how to get it without having our faces rearranged by whatever security system's running the show." "Why do I feel like I'm about to make a bad decision?" Jax asked no one in particular, though Thorn felt the accusation keenly enough. "It's called life," Thorn said, "and you're welcome." Mags, ever the pragmatist, frowned thoughtfully. "The ship systems recognized our DNA signature before things went sideways. Maybe we can use that to our advantage." "You mean fool it again?" Jax asked, skepticism lacing his voice. "Seems to me like fooling this thing is a one-way ticket to a spectacularly messy end." "Not necessarily," Mags countered, tapping her tablet as she thought out loud. "If we can convince the system we're part of the crew, maybe we can access their supplies without triggering the defenses." Thorn considered it, weighing their slim odds like a gambler evaluating a rigged game. "It's a long shot," he admitted. "But unless someone's got a secret stash of rations, it's the only play we've got." Jack sighed dramatically. "Well, when you put it like that, how could I resist? Let's go steal some alien groceries." "Good attitude," Thorn said with a grin. "Now, let's get back to the Dreadnought and see if we can't con our way into some lunch." With a deep breath and more bravado than good sense, they turned the rust bucket around, heading back toward the Dreadnought with a sense of grim determination. After all, in a universe that seemed determined to kill them at every opportunity, what was one more suicidal plan between friends? As they approached the alien hulk, Thorn couldn't help but feel the oppressive weight of its shadow once more. It loomed like a forgotten god, indifferent to their plight and as inscrutable as the cosmos itself. "All right," Thorn said as they neared the docking point. "Mags, see if you can't sweet-talk the system into letting us in without vaporizing us into stardust." "Sweet-talking alien systems," Mags muttered. "Just what my degree in xenolinguistics prepared me for." With fingers as nimble as a pickpocket's, Mags interfaced with the Dreadnought's entry protocols, her eyes flickering across the screen as if reading a particularly juicy piece of gossip. Thorn and Jax watched, tense but hopeful, their fate resting on her ability to outwit a millennia-old security system. "Got it," Mags said after a tense moment, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "That's it?" Jax asked, disbelief coloring his voice. "We're in, just like that." "Just like that," Mags confirmed, though her expression was tempered with caution. "But let's not get cocky." The system might still decide where lunch meet. With a shared look of resolve, they suited up once more, ready to face whatever the Dreadnought had in store for them. The hangar door opened, admitting them like unwelcome relatives at a wedding, and they stepped aboard with wary confidence. The Dreadnought's corridors were as foreboding as ever, the shadows clinging to every corner like a second skin. Thorn led the way, flashlight flickering ominously, each footfall echoing like a drumbeat of doom. "Feels like home," Jack said, his voice echoing eerily in the silence. "If your home was a haunted mansion with a murderous butler," Mags added dryly. They navigated the labyrinthine halls with practiced caution, every sense tuned for the slightest hint of danger. The further they ventured, the more Thorn was convinced the ship's original crew had been obsessed with mazes. Either that, or they were just plain sadistic, possibly both. Eventually, they reached the food storage area, a massive chamber lined with alien containers that seemed to hum with potential. The air was thick with the scent of preserved sustenance, a tantalizing promise for their empty bellies. "Welcome to the alien pantry," Thorn said with a wry grin. "Let's just hope the expiry dates are a little more forgiving than ours." Mags approached the storage interface, her expression a mixture of excitement and grim determination. "Let's see if we can get these open without setting off a chain reaction." Jack snorted. That'd be one hell of a way to go, death by pantry. They watched as Mags worked, the alien script on her screen shifting and changing as she navigated the system's protocols. It was a tense few minutes, each second stretching out like eternity itself, but finally, with a soft hiss, the first of the containers opened. Inside, the contents looked surprisingly ordinary. Packs of preserved food, neatly stacked and organized, a testament to the aliens' practicality. Thorn rifled through a few, noting the lack of any discernible labeling. "Well, it looks edible," he said, handing a package to Jax. "Care to taste test?" Jax examined the packet warily, as if it might decide to sprout teeth and bite him. "I'd rather not die from alien food poisoning, thanks." Mags, ever the scientist, pulled out a small scanner and ran it over the contents. "No detectable toxins," she announced. "At least none that our instruments can pick up, but I'd still suggest starting with a small bite." All right, Jax conceded, tearing open the packet with exaggerated caution. He took a tentative bite, chewing thoughtfully. "Tastes weird. You probably say that about anything that isn't boiled protein bars," Thorn said, grabbing a packet for himself. "But weird is about as good as we're gonna get." They set about gathering as much as they could carry, the prospect of actual sustenance lending their movements a renewed vigor. It was a grim sort of triumph, the kind that came with the realization that survival was a series of compromises and desperate gambles. With their packs filled, they turned to leave, the sense of achievement tempered by the knowledge that this was only a temporary reprieve. The universe was still out there, still full of dangers and uncertainties, but for now they had food and water. For now they had hope. As they made their way back to the rust bucket, Thorn felt a flicker of optimism amid the cynicism that had become his constant companion. If they could manage this, what else could they accomplish? Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to turn the universe's grim humor back on itself. Back in the rust bucket, the atmosphere was lighter, the weight of their survival slightly lessened by the promise of impending meals. They stowed their hard-won supplies, the prospect of a future less tenuous than before. "Well," Jack said, stretching out with a contented sigh, "I suppose that calls for a toast, if we had anything stronger than recycled water. Cheers to not starving," Mags added, raising an imaginary glass with a wry smile. Thorn chuckled, the sound more sincere than it had been in a long time. "Cheers to surviving another day," he said. "And to whatever madness tomorrow brings." They clinked pretend glasses, the gesture one of camaraderie and shared struggle. In the vast, indifferent expanse of space, they were a small defiance against the odds, a testament to the stubbornness of humanity. Their immediate crisis averted, they settled in for the journey ahead, the rust bucket carrying them onward into a future uncertain and full of promise. As they sailed away from the Dreadnought, they knew that the universe hadn't had its last laugh yet. But whatever came next, they'd be ready. The rust bucket creaked and groaned in protest, as if it was not entirely on board with Thorne's latest stroke of genius, or what passed for genius around these parts. Not that Thorne cared much for the opinion of a ship that had more in common with a junkyard than a spacecraft. At least it was honest about its shortcomings, which was more than could be said for most people. "Seems a shame to leave without at least a few fireworks," Jax mused, adjusting the straps on his pack. "I've always thought a bit of spectacle could brighten this place up." "Spectacle's overrated," Thorne replied, checking the seals on his suit. "Besides, the only thing that'll explode around here is your ego if you keep feeding it." Jax chuckled, a sound as dry as ration crackers. "If you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space." "Save the philosophy for the next time we run out of oxygen," Mags cut in, her fingers dancing over her tablet with the kind of frenetic energy most people reserved for defusing bombs. "For now, let's just focus on not getting vaporized." "You make it sound so easy," Thorne remarked, taking point as they moved down the corridor. The Dreadnought loomed ahead, its bulk a silent guardian, or possibly a jailer, depending on how their luck played out. And if there was one thing Thorne had learned, it was that the universe rarely dealt a winning hand without a few hidden aces up its sleeve. The hangar opened up before them like the maw of a beast, ready to swallow them whole. It was the kind of place that whispered promises of forgotten secrets and untold dangers, and if Thorne had learned anything, it was that such promises rarely came with a refund policy. "You think the ship's trying to tell us something?" Jax asked, eyeing the shadows warily. "Maybe it just wanted some company," Thorne replied, his flashlight flickering in the half-light. "Can't blame it for being lonely. It's been drifting out here longer than your average conspiracy theory." Mag snorted, a sound that was simultaneously amused and exasperated. "Careful, or you'll start feeling sorry for it." "Fat chance of that," Thorne said, leading the way through the labyrinthine passages with the kind of confidence usually reserved for people who had a map. Which they didn't, but that had never stopped them before. The food storage area loomed ahead, an oasis in a desert of metallic corridors and oppressive silence. It was the kind of place that whispered promises of sustenance, or possibly an elaborate trap, though Thorne was choosing to be optimistic for once in his life. "Let's load up and get out before the defenses decide to change their minds," Mags advised, already scanning the alien containers for any signs of imminent doom. "I've had enough close calls for one lifetime." Jax grinned, the kind of grin that suggested he relished the thrill of near-death experiences. "What's life without a little danger?" "Longer," Mags replied without missing a beat, her attention focused on the readouts scrolling across her tablet. The containers popped open with a soft hiss, revealing the bounty within. It was the kind of sight that made a person believe in miracles, or at least in the power of sheer stubborn determination. They moved quickly, each of them piling their packs with as much as they could carry, their movements efficient and practiced. "Think the alien food comes with a side of existential dread?" Jax asked, examining one of the packages with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Probably," Thorne replied, adding another pack to his load. "But at least it's not likely to kill us outright. Mags, anything we should know? No toxins that our scanners can detect," Mags confirmed, though her tone suggested she wasn't about to start trusting alien preservatives anytime soon. "I did find something interesting, though." "Interesting how?" Thorne asked, his curiosity piqued despite himself. "Interesting as in unexpected," Mags elaborated, her gaze fixed on her tablet. "Our food, what's left of it anyway, seems to neutralize the alien toxins. It's like it was designed to work in tandem, which doesn't make any sense." "None of this does," Thorne commented, already trying to piece together the implications. "But if we can mix their food with ours, it might just keep us alive long enough to figure out what the hell is going on. Or it'll turn us into human-alien hybrids, Jack suggested with a smirk. Imagine the possibilities. Like I'd ever want to improve on perfection, Thorn shot back, his tone as dry as the air in the ship. Besides, hybrid or not, we've got a job to do. Mags, see if you can get anything else out of their systems while we're here. Mags nodded, already lost in the data streaming across her screen. You got it, Captain. If there's a secret to be found, I'll find it. The irony of human food neutralizing alien toxins wasn't lost on Thorn. It was almost poetic in a twisted kind of way, like the universe was throwing them a bone just to keep the game interesting. Still, he wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth, especially not when it came with a side of survival. They moved with purpose, the tension of their earlier foray easing as they made their way back to the rust bucket. The corridors, once ominous and foreboding, now seemed almost welcoming, as if the Dreadnought had decided they weren't worth the effort of killing. For now, anyway. Think we'll ever catch a break? Jax asked, his tone half joking, half hopeful. Not unless we make one, Thorn replied, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. But we've got food, we've got water, and we've got a ship that hasn't exploded yet. I'd say we're doing better than expected. That's a low bar, Mags pointed out, though her smile suggested she wasn't entirely dissatisfied with their progress. Better a low bar than none at all, Thorn said, leading them back to the docking point. The rust bucket waited like an old friend, its familiar bulk a reassuring presence amid the alien surroundings. As they boarded, the weight of their supplies a comforting burden, Thorn felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. It was a fragile thing, easily crushed by the realities of their situation, but for now, it was enough to keep them going. Back on the rust bucket, the atmosphere was lighter, the prospect of real food lifting their spirits in a way that nothing else could. They stowed their supplies with care, the knowledge that their survival was a little less precarious than before adding a touch of warmth to the cold metal around them. Well, Jack said, collapsing into a chair with a satisfied sigh. That was fun. Let's never do it again. Agreed, Mags replied, though her expression was one of quiet satisfaction. But if we have to, at least we know we can. Yeah, Thorn said, settling into his own seat with a weariness that spoke of too many close calls and not enough sleep. And next time, maybe we'll be the ones with the upper hand. Here's to hoping, Jack said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast to uncertain futures and improbable victories. May we always be just lucky enough. They clinked their pretend glasses together, the gesture one of camaraderie and shared defiance. In the vastness of space, with its endless uncertainties and hidden dangers, they were a small testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Or at the very least, a stubborn refusal to give up without a fight. With their immediate crisis averted, they settled in for the journey ahead, the rust bucket carrying them onward into a future as unpredictable as their past. As they sailed away from the Dreadnought, Thorn knew that the universe hadn't had its last laugh yet. But whatever it had in store, they'd be ready, armed with nothing more than their wits, their determination, and the knowledge that even in the bleakest of situations, there was always a chance to turn the tables. The rust bucket hurtled through the void, a barely functional relic that seemed to defy the laws of probability with every creak and groan. Captain Thorn sat back in the pilot's chair, the autopilot doing its best impression of competence. It was the kind of thing you learn to appreciate out here, like finding out the mystery meat wasn't made of actual mystery. So, we heading back to Earth to be hailed as heroes or just to get shot at by creditors? Jax flopped into the co-pilot's seat, stretching his legs out with the kind of nonchalance reserved for people who had given nihilism a serious go. Heroes, creditors, what's the difference? Both want your head on a platter eventually, Thorn replied, tapping the console with a mix of affection and frustration. Besides, I doubt anyone's throwing a parade for the crew of the rust bucket. Unless it's a funeral procession. Mags, perched on the edge of her seat with the tablet that had become an extension of her being, glanced up with a smirk. Maybe we'll get a plaque. "In memoriam of dumb luck and stubborn idiots." "Catchy," said Jax. "Put it next to the Council of the Terminally Unimpressed award we got last year. I'm just hoping we get back without the ship deciding to spontaneously combust," Thorn muttered, casting a wary glance at the flickering lights. Rustbucket had the uncanny ability to surprise them in the worst of ways, like a cat bringing in a dead rat as a gift. "You'd miss it if it didn't try to kill us at least once a week," Mags pointed out. Her fingers flew over the tablet, analyzing the data they'd filched from the Dreadnought. "Speaking of surprises, this alien tech we snagged, it's like nothing I've ever seen. It's elegant, in a we could definitely use this to ruin someone's day kind of way. Sounds like my kind of party." Jax leaned over to peer at the screen, squinting at the alien script that Mags had somehow managed to translate. "What's that bit say? Turn back or face annihilation," Mags read, rolling her eyes. "Real creative, these aliens. The universe must have run out of threat writers halfway through their invasion. Better than welcome, please wipe your feet," Thorn noted, setting their course for Earth. "How's the food looking? Any chance it'll do more than just remind us how much we hate our own cooking? If I've got this right, we mix it with our own supplies and it's like magic. The toxins neutralize and it actually becomes nutritious." Mag sounded almost impressed, which from her was high praise indeed. Weirdly poetic, really. "Our crap food makes their alien delicacies digestible." "Figures," Jax said, snorting. Only a human could turn gourmet alien cuisine into intergalactic fast food. They settled into a rhythm, the silence punctuated by the occasional beep of a system, adjusting to their new trajectory. It was the kind of calm that came after the storm, a moment to breathe, to reflect, to pretend they weren't still hurtling through space on a ship held together by little more than stubbornness and duct tape. "So what's the plan when we get back?" Mags asked, looking between them. "Besides not dying, preferably." "Well, we've got to eat, sleep, and maybe figure out why our food plays nice with alien toxins," Thorn said, counting on his fingers. "And if we've got time, maybe sell our story to the highest bidder. Assuming the highest bidder isn't already planning to dissect us for parts," Jax added dryly. "Optimism, Jax. It's called optimism," they laughed. The kind of laughter that came from knowing just how precarious their situation was. It was gallows humor at its finest, and it kept them sane in the face of the universe's cruel indifference. As Earth finally came into view, a blue-green marble suspended in the black, Thorn felt a flicker of something warm and almost forgotten, pride. They'd survived against all odds. They'd faced down an alien dreadnought and come away with their lives and more. It was a victory, no matter how small. "Home, sweet home," Jax said, mockingly saluting the planet below. "And we didn't even explode on the way." Yet Mags corrected him, but her smile softened the barb. "Let's not count our chickens before they hatch, or whatever the saying is, or before they mutate into something with tentacles," Thorn quipped. He steeled himself as they entered the atmosphere, the ship shuddering and complaining all the way through. Docking procedures at the spaceport were about as welcoming as an IRS audit, but at least they were on solid ground. They disembarked, each of them stretching muscles stiff from too long in zero-G, and exchanged looks that conveyed a wealth of unspoken understanding. "Well, we made it," Thorn said, his voice tinged with a mix of disbelief and relief. "Guess that means we've got to deal with all the messy bits now. Humans versus bureaucracy. Who will win?" Jax said in a mock announcer voice. "Spoiler alert, it's never us." They moved through the port, a ragtag trio that drew looks of curiosity and skepticism from the more polished crews around them. It was fine. They'd always been outsiders, and they wore it like a badge of honor, a testament to their survival in a universe that seemed determined to chew them up and spit them out. As they made their way to the debriefing with the agency, Thorn reflected on the irony of their situation. Here they were, back on Earth with alien secrets in hand, and yet the first thing they'd have to deal with would be paperwork. It was almost poetic in a way that made him want to laugh and scream at the same time. The debriefing room was sterile and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. A panel of officials sat across from them, eyes sharp and expressions unreadable. Captain Thorne, crew of the Rust Bucket, the lead official, began, her tone cool and professional. "You've returned with material of interest. What can you tell us?" Thorne exchanged a look with Jax and Mags, and they nodded. "We found evidence of alien technology, food supplies that interact with our own in unexpected ways, and automated defenses that would make anyone lose sleep. Sounds like a hell of a trip," the official said, her gaze unyielding. "And the implications of this technology, what do you make of it?" "Life-changing," Mags interjected, leaning forward. "If we can harness it, understand it, it could revolutionize our understanding of biology, technology, hell, everything, and the food." Another official asked, incredulous. "It's complimentary," Jax added, shrugging. "Turns out our junk can detoxify their delicacies." "Who knew?" The panel exchanged glances, murmuring amongst themselves. Thorne could see the wheels turning, the cogs of bureaucracy grinding away as they assessed the potential and the risks of what they'd brought back. "You'll be debriefed further, of course," the lead official said eventually, "but understand that this is of the utmost importance. The potential impact—" "We get it," Thorne interrupted, his patience wearing thin. "But let's cut to the chase. What's in it for us?" "Your records will be revised," she replied, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Your debts adjusted. And should you choose to continue working with us, there may be further opportunities." Translation: "They won't throw us in a cell and throw away the key," Jax said with a wry grin. How generous. They left the debriefing room with a mix of relief and trepidation. Sure, they'd survived, but now they had to navigate the murky waters of corporate and governmental interests. It was a different kind of danger, one that required as much cunning and resilience as any alien encounter. Back on the Rust Bucket, Thorne sank into his chair, letting out a long breath. They'd done it. They'd brought back something that could change everything. But at what cost? "Think we'll ever get a break?" Mags asked, her voice reflecting the weariness they all felt. "Not unless we make one," Thorne replied, echoing his earlier words. "But at least we know we can. And what about the universe's sick sense of humor?" Jax chimed in, leaning back with a satisfied sigh. "Think it's done with us yet?" "Probably not," Thorne admitted. "But when it is, we'll be ready." They sat in companionable silence, the weight of their journey settling around them like an old, familiar coat. The universe was vast and uncaring, but they were still here, still fighting. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. As they prepared to face whatever came next, the crew of the Rust Bucket knew one thing for certain: resilience wasn't just about survival. It was about facing the unexpected, the unknown, and laughing in the face of it all. Because if they couldn't laugh, they'd probably cry, and crying was not an option. With Earth beneath them and the stars ahead, they'd continue their journey, armed with nothing more than determination, sarcasm, and a stubborn refusal to go quietly into the night. The universe could throw whatever it wanted at them. They'd be ready.